Excited to be joined now by Kyle Kondik, great friend of the show and writer for Sabato's Crystal Ball at the UVA Center for Politics. Great to see you, friend.
Good to see you, man.
Thanks for having me.
So you have, I think, very smart analysis here of Joe Biden's prospects for re-election. Let's put this up on the screen. You say, is Biden's approval rating too weak for him to win? Just like in 2022, soft disapprovers are a key block. So as you point out here, presidential approval ratings oftentimes determine whether or not an incumbent president is going to get reelected. Biden's approval rating has been consistently now for a while fairly poor. So what do you make of that landscape and what it means for his chances?
Well, look, I think either Biden is going to have to get to 50% approval or better, or he's going to have to do what Democrats showed some success in doing in 2022, which was that Democrats were able to win the group of voters. It was like 10 to 12% of voters in 2022 who said that they somewhat disapproved of Biden, but they voted Democratic anyway in the House elections in 2022, according to the exit polls. And typically I think you would look at Biden as being 42, 43% approve, 52. 53% disapprove, and you'd say this is a president who's probably not going to win again. But he's so reliant, just like he was in 2020, on basically the weakness of the Republican Party and the weakness of the Republican nominee. With Trump in 2020 and maybe Trump again in 2024. That I still think Biden's got a decent chance despite his own weaknesses, but that's because he always has this line about don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative, and he's very reliant on the alternative, I think.
Right. So this is the very interesting thing, Kyle. Do we have a modern precedent for a president where the vast majority of his own party doesn't necessarily want him to run, however, sees him still as preferable, and still the independent voters would still push him over the edge to make him quite electable? I'm trying to think in my mind. I mean, even if we look at the Carter primary, he still did win a competitive primary against Ted Kennedy. Do we have a historical parallel for what's happening right now?
If you went back and looked at some of Reagan's numbers in early 1983, you can find a lot of hesitance about him running again and concerns about his age and those sorts of things. Now, look, I think Reagan was also, obviously he ended up winning in a huge landslide. He did have a fairly weak Democratic opponent, Walter Mondale, but he also had some things breaking in his favor on the economic front over the course of 83 and 84. But Reagan, just like Biden's the oldest president ever, but Reagan is near the top of the list too. And there were some concerns about him as well, though Reagan ended up not having really any primary opposition. Biden does have some primary opposition, but I wouldn't consider it particularly strong. So there's some softness there, but there's been softness for previous presidents too who ended up getting reelected.
Yep.
I do think it's unique, though, what a small percentage of his own party wants him to be renominated, which is, I was just looking at the numbers earlier in the show, which does stand out as a contrast from Clinton, from Obama, from Trump, certainly as well, where Trump was very unpopular, but his own party was enthusiastic about him, which is different for Biden. With Biden, the feelings towards him are, and this has been, I think, fairly consistent since he's been running for the presidential nomination. It's just been sort of like, people don't love him. They don't hate him the way that they hate a Trump-like figure. And so you point to something here that I think is really key, which is what you describe as soft Biden disapprovers. People who probably don't like either of these candidates, and maybe they hate Biden less than they hate Donald Trump, which I think was kind of a key factor for him in winning the presidency to start with.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you go back and look at in 2016, there were a lot of people who held an unfavorable view of both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And at the end, those folks broke toward Trump because they wanted a change. Right now, I don't know if I think that Trump might have a hard time winning over those voters. But, the thing is, too, is you can't just say, oh, well, Trump can't win again. I mean, of course he can win again. I mean, the floor for both parties, I think, is really high in American politics. I think historically, you'd think, oh, well, a major party nominee is going to get, 40% of the vote or something. Now it's probably more like 45 or 46 or something like that. So we're only talking about, kind of a relatively small sliver of the electorate and a relatively small number of swing states. And I was talking yesterday to a pretty prominent political reporter, and we were going back and forth about the Electoral College. And, there were 7 states that were decided by 3 points or less in 2020. And we were thinking, boy, is Michigan like really a swing state? Is North Carolina really a swing state? And then you start to whittle down the list, and maybe it's just like 3 or 4 states like Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Nevada that are like true toss-ups for 2020. So, there's not a whole lot of persuadable voters out there. The floors for both parties are very high. You don't have a lot of super competitive swing states. And so, there's not, again, there are key voting blocks that are going to be important here, but again, the floors for both parties are pretty high.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent point. It's something I always point out. I'm like, listen, any nominee of a major party can win the presidency, period. There is no somebody can't win. It's like if you're the nominee of the Republican or Democratic Party, you absolutely can win. Now, it's a game of inches basically from there. If we're to look at some of the most determinative factors, Kyle, the economy is one which I remember in 2020, the Trump campaign always told me. They said, yeah, they don't approve of COVID, but his economic numbers, those are always strong. And it was much closer than a lot of people thought. What are the similar historical metrics people should track for Joe Biden to see how things will be trending towards Election Day in the next coming months before November 2024?
Yeah, I do think just Biden's approval rating is a great catch-all for like how people feel about the state of the country. And look, I'd be very surprised if Biden got to 50% approval by, November 2024. But, I think the trajectory probably matters. Again, he's in the kind of low to mid 40s right now. If he does kind of climb clearly over 45% by the time election comes, that combined with the potential weakness of the Republican nominee. I mean, hey, maybe the Republicans will nominate a great candidate who's popular and who runs circles around Biden. I mean, we don't know that yet, but I don't think that candidate is Trump if Trump does in fact get renominated. But, the approval rating would also kind of pick up people's broader concerns about the country. So like, to the extent that they care about the economy and attribute that to presidential performance, that would appear in the approval rating. If Biden is like lower in approval in next fall than he is now, that would, I think, be a pretty clear warning sign that he was going to lose. So again, don't necessarily think that Biden has to be at 50, but I think the trajectory of that probably matters. And, obviously there are these big economic indicators, although, we did just go through an election where, the Republicans seem to have the economic argument kind of handed to them on a silver platter, and voters, generally trusted them on the economy more. And yet it was a pretty mixed and fairly weak result for the Republicans, even though they did flip the House. So there's a lot more that people are voting on than just the economy. I think these things are maybe a little bit more complicated than they used to be, and people are maybe more tribal or voting on cultural matters. I mean, obviously, abortion, I think, continues to be a really big deal, particularly in the wake of the Dobbs decision. But, even if the economy is bad, I don't necessarily know if that means that Biden can't win. And you may not have said that like a generation or two about
right. Yeah, I mean, I think abortion was has really upended politics. I mean, the results that we just had from that Wisconsin state Supreme Court race, where Wisconsin is the ultimate swing state, and you got a candidate who's winning on abortion by more than easily double digits. That shows you the power and how visceral that issue is for a lot of folks. Speak a little bit to enthusiasm and turnout. One thing that Trump has consistently done is he has increased turnout. He's increased turnout among Republicans. He's also increased turnout in Democrats who want to vote against him. What do you see in the numbers in terms of, the Republicans still feel as enthusiastic about Trump that they really want to show up to vote for him? Do Democrats still feel as enthusiastic as they did to vote against him and see him as the central threat that they, have since he really came on the scene in 2016? What do you see in those indicators?
I suspect that if Trump is in fact renominated, that sort of voting against Trump will probably be a bigger motivator for Democrats than voting for Biden, which was the case in 2020. I think it's also worth noting that an unenthusiastic vote is worth just as much as an enthusiastic vote.
Right.
And I remember this specifically from the 2012 election because Democrats. Republicans at times had enthusiasm advantages in polling, but the sort of the likely voter models and what have you still indicated that enough Democrats were going to show up to reelect Obama. It was a close election, but a pretty clear victory for Obama. And I kind of wonder if Biden were to win again this time, if it might be a similar sort of situation where Democrats are not necessarily enthusiastic about Biden. In fact, they're certainly less enthusiastic about him than they were for Obama, who's sort of a more dynamic, charismatic figure. But at the same time, just the specter of Trump winning again could very well be motivating for Democrats to show up.
Yeah, well, based on the launch video today, that's certainly the case that they're betting on. I routinely bring up that I think it's really central to their thinking. Ron Klain tweeting in the wake of Emmanuel Macron getting reelected with like a 30-something% approval rating in France, like, hey, interesting. Apparently there's something that we can work with there if the opposition is sufficiently odious enough. So, Kyle, thank you so much for your analysis. It's always great to have you.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Our pleasure.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Really appreciate it. It was a hell on earth wearing this. It's okay. We all made it through together with the suit hoodie. You will still never, ever see it again now that Don has finally been fired.
Frankensteinian outfit.
Yes. Let me just say again, thank you to all the premium members signing up, helping us out at this time whenever we're shelling out more than we ever have before for the studio. But not only that, we had breaking news segments. Our team was on the ball. We were ready to go. We have our stuff posted. They work so hard out there. We appreciate so much of what we ask them. We are a very, very demanding workplace here at BP, and we do it all for all of you. And we see how much you guys respond to it. Hundreds of thousands of you downloading the podcast, sharing the podcast. It means the world to all of us. So we'll see you guys on Thursday. We've got a great Counterpoint show for everybody tomorrow, and we just want to thank you all again. BreakingPoints.com if you're able to help us out.
Love you guys. We'll see you here Thursday. Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage